The cold void of space stretched endlessly, silent and indifferent. Stars shimmered like distant beacons, their light taking centuries to reach this corner of the universe. In the heart of the Zenthari Empire, a planet-sized space station hovered above a crimson world. It was the Imperial War Command, the center of power for the most dominant alien race in the galaxy. Inside the station, a Grand Council chamber buzzed with tension. The towering figure of General Valeroth, a war-hardened Zenthari commander, stood at the center. His scaled face curled into a smirk as he addressed his officers. Humans. A threat? Absurd. His deep voice echoed across the room. A holographic display flickered in the air, showing a galactic map. A small red blip pulsed in an insignificant part of space, Earth's location. Valeroth chuckled. They are insects, a primitive species playing with fire. Their technology is outdated. Their fleets are laughable. If they dared to attack us, they would be crushed in days. The officers around him nodded in agreement. The Zenthari Empire had conquered 100 worlds, crushed entire civilizations, and wiped out countless threats before they could rise. Then, without warning, the holographic map glitched. The display flickered wildly before stabilizing, now showing something impossible, an anomaly near the outer colonies. A fleet of unknown origin had entered Zenthari space. The room fell silent. What is this? Valeroth snapped, his sharp claws tapping against the metal console. A technician worked frantically at his station, his breathing unsteady. Sir, we don't know. The ships are invisible to our long-range scanners. They don't match any known configuration. Valeroth frowned. Invisible ships. That wasn't possible. Only the Zenthari had advanced cloaking technology, and even that was limited. He turned to his intelligence officer. Send a scout patrol. I want a visual confirmation. Within minutes, a squadron of Zenthari interceptors launched from the station, sleek and deadly. They sped toward the anomaly, their engines leaving trails of blue plasma in the darkness. As the pilots neared the sector, their instruments flickered, radar signals jammed, communication scrambled. Then, out of the void, they saw them. A massive human war fleet, emerging like ghosts from the abyss. Jet-black ships with smooth angular designs. No insignias, no transmissions, no warnings. The lead pilot barely had time to react before his HUD filled with flashing red alerts. Multiple locks detected. We're being targeted. The transmission cut off. A silent explosion bloomed in the void as the first interceptor vanished in a burst of blue energy. The other ships tried to break formation, but it was useless. One by one, they were erased from existence, their destruction eerily quiet in the vacuum of space. Back at the War Command, officers watched in horror as the transmission screens went black. What the hell just happened? Valeroth growled. Sir, the technician's voice was barely above a whisper. They're humans. Silence. Then the station shook violently. Alarms blared as emergency lights flickered red. A stealth attack had begun. Zenthari battlecruisers scrambled to react, but the enemy was already inside their defenses. Human ships moved with precision, striking key stations, shutting down weapons systems before they could even be activated. Valeroth clenched his fists. How did they get this far? How did we not see them coming? The answer was terrifyingly simple. They had underestimated humanity. More explosions rocked the station. The Imperial War Command, the heart of the Empire, was under siege. For the first time in Zenthari history, they were being invaded. Panic spread through the Zenthari War Command like wildfire. Officers barked orders, scrambling to make sense of the chaos unfolding around them. The space station's shields were still active, yet somehow, enemy ships had breached their defenses. General Valeroth stood rigid in the command center, his sharp claws digging into the metal console. His mind refused to accept what was happening. No species had ever dared attack the Zenthari Empire on their own turf, let alone humans. I want all planetary defenses online. Find them. Find those ships now." His voice boomed. But the station's crew was already in disarray. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere at once. Across the fleet, Zentheri captains screamed over the comms. Their battlecruisers were firing blindly into the void, trying to hit ghosts. The human fleet remained nearly invisible, their ships cloaked in advanced stealth fields. The few glimpses the Zentheri caught were terrifying. Sleek, black warships, moving with impossible coordination. Then the real attack began. Zentheri battleships exploded in rapid succession, their hulls torn apart by weapons they couldn't see. Human railgun projectiles punched straight through their thickest armor, leaving nothing but burning wreckage behind. Valeroth turned to his fleet commander. "How are they hitting us? Our sensors should detect energy signatures." The officer's scales were damp with sweat. "They aren't using energy weapons, General. They're using kinetic railguns. No energy emissions. Our sensors can't track them." Valeroth's stomach twisted. The Zentheri had always relied on their energy shields, designed to absorb laser-based attacks, the kind most civilizations used. But humans had found a way around it. Suddenly, a deep tremor ran through the war station. Emergency sirens screamed. "Sir," a technician cried, "enemy forces have breached the station." Valeroth's breath caught in his throat. Impossible. But it was true. A human strike team had landed. Inside the zenith-level security sectors, armored human soldiers stormed through the corridors. Their exosuits gleamed under the flickering emergency lights, their visors glowing a cold, emotionless blue. They moved without hesitation, each shot from their weapons finding its mark. Zentheri warriors rushed to meet them, their plasma rifles lighting up the halls with bursts of green fire. But the humans didn't flinch. Their armor absorbed the plasma, dispersing the heat harmlessly. Then they returned fire. Smart rounds curved around cover, striking Zentheri soldiers who thought they were safe. The air filled with the screams of dying warriors. Deep in the command center, Valeroth watched the security feeds in horror. "How did they get in?" he demanded. An officer stammered, "Sir, they hacked our security grid. They disabled our automated defenses before we even knew they were here." Valeroth slammed his fist into the console. Human cyber warfare. He had dismissed them as primitive, yet now they were using AI-driven electronic warfare more advanced than anything the Zentheri had ever encountered. The feed flickered. The image of a human soldier filled the screen. Not just any soldier, a commander. His face was lined with age, his gaze like steel. The name tag on his exosuit read, Admiral Leon Graves. General Valeroth. The human's voice was calm, almost cold. "You have lost. Surrender now, and we will show mercy." The transmission cut off before Valeroth could respond. The humans weren't just attacking. They were here to conquer. The War Command Station trembled under another explosion. Smoke filled the corridors, the scent of burning metal and ozone thick in the air. The alarm screamed relentlessly, casting a red glow over the chaos. The Zentheri Empire had never known fear, not until now. General Valeroth stood in the shattered remains of the command center, his claws tightening into fists. The humans had breached their strongest defenses, their ships had ripped through the Zentheri fleet, and now their soldiers were inside the war station itself, cutting through elite warriors like they were nothing. Another officer's voice crackled over the comms. "General, the outer fleet is down. We have lost 60% of our capital ships." Valeroth's throat tightened. This was beyond disaster. This was annihilation. The screen in front of him flickered, struggling to keep up with the rapid devastation. The humans weren't just winning. They were crushing the Zentheri Empire's forces with a precision that was terrifying to watch. Every counterattack the Zentheri launched was met with immediate, merciless retaliation. Outside, the battle for control of the Zentheri home system raged on. Zentheri warships, massive and adorned with golden imperial markings, fired in all directions, their plasma cannons unleashing torrents of energy. But it was useless. The humans weren't fighting like any enemy the Empire had ever faced. Their ships didn't charge head-on. They didn't fire wildly in the hopes of landing hits. No, they were hunting. Sleek human warships moved in coordinated packs, weaving through enemy fire with inhuman precision. Their weapons didn't rely on energy. They used mass-driver cannons, enormous railguns that fired hyper-dense slugs at speeds too fast to track. The Zentheri shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, were completely useless against them. One by one, the largest Zentheri battleships were torn apart, their hulls caving in from the sheer force of the human weapons. The once mighty Empire was falling apart in real time. Inside the war station, the Zentheri High Command was on the verge of total collapse. Valeroth turned to his remaining officers. "Activate the planetary defense grid. I want all ground-based cannons targeting those ships. We will not fall today." But before his men could respond, the station lights flickered again. The red emergency glow dimmed. The alarms cut out. For a moment, there was an eerie silence. Then the humans hijacked their entire communication system. A voice, calm, deep, and undeniably human, filled the room. "Zentheri Command. This is Admiral Leon Graves of the United Terran Navy. You are defeated. Stand down or be erased." Valeroth's claws dug into the console. "Damn you, human." With a snarl, he slammed his fist onto the emergency override. Across the planet, every last Zentheri ground cannon came to life. Massive plasma batteries, buried beneath the planet's surface, rose from the ground like mechanical giants. The skies above the capital city crackled with the glow of charging energy weapons. If the humans thought the fight was over, they were wrong. The counterattack began. From the surface, thousands of plasma beams erupted into the sky, slamming into the human fleet with devastating force. Explosions lit up the atmosphere, human ships taking direct hits for the first time since the battle had begun. On the ground, Zentheri warriors regrouped. Their remaining forces dug into defensive positions, preparing for what they knew was coming next: the ground invasion. And then, as expected, the sky split open. Human dropships, sleek and black, descended from orbit in perfect formation. The clouds boiled as shockwaves of atmospheric entry echoed across the planet. Thousands of armored soldiers rained from the sky, their boots slamming into the battlefield with terrifying force. The final battle for the Zentheri homeworld had begun. The sky above the Zentheri homeworld burned. Wreckage from destroyed battleships rained down like falling stars, leaving fiery streaks across the atmosphere. The once proud Imperial fleet was in shambles, its mighty warships torn apart by the relentless human assault. Inside the Imperial War Command, General Valeroth stood motionless, his reptilian eyes fixed on the tactical display in front of him. The screen showed the horrifying reality. Human ships had broken through the last defensive lines, their forces pushing deeper into Zentheri territory. This cannot be happening." His voice was barely above a whisper. For centuries, the Zentheri Empire had ruled the galaxy's core worlds with unmatched power. Their fleets had crushed rebellions, enslaved weaker species, and expanded their dominion without challenge. No enemy had ever posed a serious threat. Until now. Another explosion rocked the station, sending sparks flying from the overhead lights. The floor trembled beneath Valeroth's feet as emergency sirens blared. Smoke filled the air, mixing with the scent of burning metal. "General," a frantic officer rushed to his side. "The planetary defense grid is online, but we are still losing ships. Their cloaking technology makes them impossible to track." Valeroth clenched his jaw. The humans fought like no enemy the Zentheri had ever encountered. They didn't rely on brute force or overwhelming numbers. Instead, they struck with surgical precision, disabling key targets, cutting off supply lines, and crippling the Empire's ability to fight back. They had come not just to attack, but to conquer. Outside, the battle raged on. Zentheri warships, their golden armor reflecting the distant glow of their dying fleet, fired blindly into the void, desperately trying to hit their unseen enemies. Plasma cannons unleashed massive bursts of energy, but the human ships danced between them with impossible agility. For every one human ship that was hit, 10 Zentheri ships fell. The humans' weapons were different. Instead of energy-based weaponry, they used railguns and kinetic projectiles, firing hypervelocity rounds that tore through armor like paper. The Zentheri's energy shields, designed to absorb laser and plasma attacks, were useless against solid projectiles moving at near-light speed. On the planet's surface, the final phase of the battle had begun. The sky tore apart as human dropships descended from orbit. Massive shockwaves rippled across the landscape as they touched down, their doors slamming open to unleash wave after wave of human soldiers. Zentheri warriors rushed to meet them, their plasma rifles lighting up the battlefield. Buildings collapsed, vehicles exploded, and the ground shook with every impact. But the humans were unstoppable. They moved with deadly efficiency, their advanced exosuits absorbing enemy fire, while their weapons shredded through Zentheri ranks. A squad of Zentheri elites tried to flank them, only to be caught in a targeted orbital strike. The blast erased them in an instant, leaving only a smoking crater. Deep inside the war station, Valeroth's breathing grew heavy. The realization sank in. They weren't just losing the battle. They were losing the war. And humanity had only just begun. The Zentheri homeworld was burning. Entire cities lay in ruins, reduced to smoldering wastelands by the relentless human assault. The Empire's once great fleet had been shattered, its warships now nothing more than debris drifting through the void. The humans had come with a vengeance, and they were not stopping. Inside the fortified remains of the Imperial War Command, General Valeroth paced, his claws scraping against the cracked metal floor. The sounds of distant explosions echoed through the halls, shaking the very foundation of the station. Reports flooded in from all over the planet. Defensive lines collapsing, supply routes cut off, command centers overrun. The humans had been relentless, striking with precision, tearing through their forces like they had planned this war for centuries. A holographic map flickered in front of Valeroth, displaying the battlefield in real time. His heart pounded as he watched human forces pushing deeper into the capital, their mechanized war machines crushing everything in their path. "General," an officer gasped, running up to him. His uniform was torn, his face covered in sweat. "The humans have taken Sector 4. Our troops are falling back." Valeroth's claws clenched into fists. "Then tell them to stand their ground. If we lose the capital, the Empire falls." But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. The battle was already lost. Across the city, human soldiers advanced. They moved in coordinated squads, their weapons cutting down any resistance with terrifying efficiency. The Zentheri defenders were outmatched, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. Their once mighty warriors, who had conquered worlds with ease, now fought desperately for survival. The sky roared as human bombers swept overhead, dropping pinpoint strikes that obliterated Zentheri strongholds. Tanks rumbled through the streets, their cannons reducing entire buildings to rubble. The Empire was crumbling. Valeroth gritted his teeth. His empire had ruled for 1,000 years, had crushed countless enemies. And now, in the span of a single campaign, it was being wiped from existence. "How?" he whispered, staring at the battlefield. "How did we underestimate them so badly?" The answer was obvious now. The humans had studied them, learned their weaknesses, adapted their tactics. They hadn't just come to fight. They had come to win. And they had succeeded. A deafening explosion shook the war station. The lights flickered, alarms blaring in a desperate warning. Then, a voice crackled through the intercom. "Zentheri Command, this is Admiral Leon Graves of the United Terran Navy. Your defenses have fallen. Your fleet is gone. Your empire is no more. Surrender or be destroyed." Silence filled the room. Valeroth looked around at his remaining officers. Defeat was written on their faces. There was no counterattack left. No reinforcements. No hope. This was the turning point. With a heavy breath, he reached for the control panel. His claws trembled as he opened the communication link. "This is General Valeroth," he said, his voice hollow. "The Zentheri Empire surrenders." The Zentheri homeworld was on the edge of destruction. The once proud cities of the Empire lay in ruins, their towering structures reduced to rubble. Fires raged across the landscape, painting the sky in shades of orange and black. The distant booming of artillery and the shriek of plasma fire filled the air as the final battle unfolded. The humans had won. Their fleet dominated the skies, their soldiers controlled most of the planet, and the Empire's leadership had surrendered. But not everyone was willing to lay down their arms. Deep beneath the capital city, in a massive underground fortress, Supreme Warlord XL-10 prepared for his final act. Unlike the politicians and generals who had accepted defeat, he refused to bow before the enemy. The Zentheri had ruled for over 1,000 years. He would not let their legacy end in shame. His loyal warriors stood beside him, thousands of battle-hardened soldiers who had sworn to fight to the last breath. Their armor was scared, their weapons low on energy, but their resolve was unshaken. They had seen their empire burn, their fleets crushed, their cities fall. But if this was the end, they would not go quietly. Above them, the final battle began. Human dropships descended like black daggers, landing on the fortress's outer defenses. Tanks rumbled forward, mechanized walkers marching in perfect formation. Soldiers, clad in their advanced combat armor, moved with precision and deadly efficiency. The Zentheri defenders opened fire. Plasma bolts lit up the battlefield, striking against human armor and vehicles. Some found their mark, sending human soldiers crashing to the ground. But the rest pushed forward, unshaken. Kinetic shields absorbed the attacks, railguns returned fire, and explosions tore through the Zentheri ranks. The walls of the fortress shook under the relentless bombardment, but XL-10 stood firm. He raised his blade, a ceremonial weapon passed down through generations of warlords, and roared, "Let the humans come. Let them bleed for every step they take." The last warriors of the Zentheri charge. Hand-to-hand combat erupted in the narrow corridors of the fortress. Blades clashed against steel. Plasma rifles fired at point-blank range. Soldiers fought with fists and claws when their weapons failed. The Zentheri warriors, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with desperation and fury. But it was not enough. The humans moved with deadly coordination, clearing the fortress one room at a time. Their weapons never missed. Their soldiers never hesitated. The Zentheri fought bravely, but one by one, they fell. XL-10, covered in blood, stood in the heart of the fortress as the final doors burst open. Human soldiers poured in, their weapons raised. Admiral Leon Graves stepped forward, his face expressionless. "Surrender," Graves said. "It's over." XL-10 let out a bitter laugh. "For you, maybe, but we are warriors. We do not kneel." With a final battle cry, he charged forward. A single railgun shot ended him. His body fell to the ground, the blade clattering beside him. And with that, the Zentheri Empire died. The war was over. The mighty Zentheri Empire, which had ruled for 1,000 years, had fallen. The last of their warriors lay dead, their weapons silent, their banners torn and burned. The humans had won, and now, the galaxy would never be the same. The once proud capital of the Zentheri homeworld was in ruins. Buildings that had stood for centuries were now blackened husks, their towering spires reduced to rubble. The streets were filled with the wreckage of war, crushed vehicles, shattered weapons, and the bodies of those who had fought until the bitter end. Smoke still rose from the destruction, carried by the wind as a reminder of what had been lost. In the heart of the city, Admiral Leon Graves stood atop the remains of what was once the Imperial Palace. The grand structure, a symbol of Zentheri power, had been leveled in the final hours of the battle. Now, only a shattered foundation remained, a fitting monument to a fallen empire. His soldiers stood around him, their weapons lowered but their eyes alert. The battle was won, but the mission was not over. Victory meant more than just defeating the enemy. It meant rebuilding what came after. A communication screen flickered to life beside him. A familiar face appeared, General Elias Carter, one of the key strategists of the war effort. "It's done," Graves said simply, his voice calm but heavy with the weight of war. Carter nodded. "The Zentheri fleets in the outer systems have surrendered. Their colonies are broadcasting distress signals. Without their empire, they won't last long." "And what about the remaining forces?" Graves asked. "Scattered. Some are trying to escape into uncharted space. Others are fighting among themselves, desperate to hold on to whatever power they have left." Carter sighed. "It's over, Leon. The war is over." Graves exhaled, letting the words sink in. For years, humanity had fought against impossible odds, standing against an empire that had seen them as nothing more than primitive upstarts. But now, the upstarts had taken everything. He turned, looking at his soldiers. "We did it," he said, his voice carrying across the ruins. "We took on an empire that thought itself invincible. We fought, we bled, and we won." A murmur of agreement ran through the soldiers, but their faces showed more than just victory. There was relief, exhaustion, and a deep, quiet understanding of what they had endured. The cost had been high. Entire fleets had been lost. Friends, brothers, sisters, so many had died to make this victory possible. The battle had been won, but no war ended without scars. Across the galaxy, news of the Zentheri's fall spread like wildfire. The enslaved species, long crushed under the Empire's rule, erupted in rebellion. The chains of oppression were shattered as the surviving Zentheri leaders surrendered to human forces. Their once mighty empire, which had ruled with terror, was now nothing but a broken memory. Back on Earth, the celebrations had already begun. The streets of every major city were flooded with people cheering, crying, and embracing each other. Humanity had not just survived. They had risen. They were no longer the underdogs of the galaxy. They were its new rulers. But Admiral Graves knew the battle was far from over. A war could end in a single moment, but what came after could shape the future for generations. The Zentheri had been ruthless, but their empire had kept order across hundreds of worlds. Now that order was gone, and in its place was a galaxy in chaos. Graves looked up at the burning sky, his fists tightening. Winning the war was one thing. Winning the peace would be another battle entirely.